Good evening, everyone. I am Harpanpreet Kaur, PhD Research Scholar in Central University of Punjab, Bathinda. Today, I welcome you all on the behalf of Indian Research Scholar Association in first day and second session of a one-week national level e-workshop on enhancing research paper writing skills. In today's session, we have with us Dr. Rinju Rasaily, Assistant Professor and Deputy Dean, Student Services Division in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University of Delhi. The topic on which she will be sharing her views with us is how to structure an academic paper. Uh, Her areas of expertise widely varies across the health, labor, and the related areas of gender and social determinants, caste, and ethnicity. So, I welcome you, ma'am, on the behalf of Indian Research Scholar Association
Thank
and
you.
all the participants of today's session. So, ma'am,
Thank you very
over to
much,
you.
Arpan Preet. And maybe I'll just share my presentation. And if anybody has any issue in audibility or even in visibility in terms of the PPT, please let me know.
Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yes, ma'am. We can see your PPT.
It's
Yes,
visible, right?
yes,
Yeah.
we can see.
So I have an hour exactly till 5 o'clock.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay, great. So maybe, yeah, very good afternoon to good evening actually to all of you. And thank you very much for this invitation. I really enjoy interacting with research scholars. And, yeah,
No, I think by
Ma'am, we can
mistake
continue. There
it
was
it
minor disturbance.
I'm
yeah. So essentially, I am maybe it might be a little repetitive or very rudimentary for some of you, but please feel free to interject because I've tried to make my presentation very very rudimentary, but we will, of course, we know. Particularly when we are in hardcore research, our both our reading and writing has to be as intensive and as extensive as possible. I decided to look at a very specific topic, which is how to structure an academic research paper. Primarily, this topic emerged given the requirement of your of today's program. And how does this go down? Can you see the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Great, great. Just let me know. Okay. So what I'm going to actually do is I've just started with this first slide, and the structure of my presentation would be obviously from a very very fundamental question is the topic of our research. What kind of because what is important for us is as researchers, it's very important for us to kind of decide one is the topic, of course, but primarily how do we formulate a research problem. What will be our research problem? That is something that is very very important for us as researchers to keep in mind. But then we are only able to arrive at that formulation after having done a very rigorous and systematic literature review. Now, why I'm saying all this, you may sound that, well, ma'am is talking like as if it's a research proposal writer, but we are talking about an academic paper. So how do we arrive at choosing what we want to publish? Okay, we are talking also of publication. So obviously, from a vast topic, say for instance, I work on labor and health. So it's a very broad topic. It's a very vast topic. But when I convert my research topic into a particular paper, it has to be very, very specific because I'm writing an academic article. I'm writing an academic piece. So therefore, that selection is only possible after one has done a substantial amount of research. So, first and foremost, thumb rule for all researchers, you know very well, is a rigorous review of literature. Now, this is something that we keep on telling our students to do as extensive and intensive as possible, primarily because we know that when we do Google Scholar or when we check on just or just random, we put in any topic, we get endless pages of references. Okay, but we need to do what is called filtering. We need to do sifting. We need to know which paper is of interest and of importance to my study, to my research topic, and accordingly we kind of build a kind of a hierarchy of literature, if I may use the term, which means that which literature is absolutely important for us as researchers, which literature can go at a, which can engage with looking at some aspect of my topic that I want to work on, or which literature is like relegated to as a footnote, or just as an explanatory note. So it is obviously the discretion of the researcher, and given the fact that what topic you want to work on, what topic you want to write on, is something that is very, very crucial for us as researchers. So of course, and the another very important, we just don't just do a systematic literature survey. The job of a researcher is also to identify the gaps in the review. When we do a review of literature, we have to identify the gaps. Say, for instance, one is working on health and labor, and I see a quantum of literature around that, but then I start filtering, I start narrowing, I start keeping folders, subfolders, sub themes. I start arranging my literature, and then I start rereading that literature and try to understand what is the gap in that literature that these authors have written about. What has not been addressed? What could have been looked at more critically? Am I interested in examining these questions? So I make my little notes as I go about reviewing the literature. And parallelly, because I'm telling you at a very nascent stage, in the sense that where we are tentative about our topic, but not very clear of on what we want to do research upon. Okay, I'm doing a combination of both this as well as how to write a paper. Okay, so that's why what happens is, once we identify the gaps, it also helps us in thinking through the the relevance, the thematics within which I would want to work upon. What are the themes? Like, say, health is so broad. Health is so huge, so vast, so broad, so in depth. So it's everywhere. Okay, so do I want to look at global burden of disease? Do I want to look at communicable disease? Do I want to look at health services? Do I want to look at health seeking behavior? What is it on health that I want to write about or research about? So the thematics will gradually emerge in your mind. You'll start thinking about the thematics as you're reading your literature very, very carefully. And then gradually these themes, you'll have to weave in with the, does it have relevance to the existing literature? So whatever literature that you gather, it should be a both way process. The literature should be of relevant to your study, and what you are proposing should be a value addition to the existing literature in social science knowledge, in our social science research. So we have to be very, very meticulous, because this is the basic groundwork for any researcher, is to do a critical review of literature. Without this, we will not be able to even problematize, conceptualize, reconceptualize, bring forth methodological questions, and then therefore do research, and then come about writing a paper. Okay, so these are very important core uh, uh, core component of an academic paper. But then, when we say what is the structure of an academic research paper, how should, I'm sure you all are very well aware about it. So therefore, as I said at the outset, it might be repetitive, it might be boring for you all, for some of you, but nevertheless, it's just a reiteration of the journey of academic writing. And so, therefore, what does a research paper comprise of? Huh? So, we know very well that we need to write an abstract. We need to write something that is called keywords. Keywords is essentially, we know very well, when we do library search, when we do online search, we always put in keywords to which will help us to get references to the so-called topic in which we want to do research upon. So keywords are very important. Abstract is very important because abstract is actually showing how the author is able to argue his or her point, what the author is saying through his or her paper in a very, very concise fashion. Because you know very well, when we search literature, most of us obviously will look at the title of the paper, and the second thing that we do is we read the abstract of the paper. Okay, we always read the abstract of the paper because the abstract tells us, gives us an idea or an inking whether the paper is relevant for us to read or not. Sometimes the paper may be mildly relevant for us. So what do? We'll just give a cursory look at it, and if we find that it is not important, we will forget that paper. If we find it is relatively important, we will read the paper. If we find it is very important, we will tend to immediately read the paper, which will also helps us in what we term later on. I'll come to the discussion on conceptualization. So the paper actually begins obviously with an introduction where primarily the author has to write obviously your research objective, your research problem, your statement of the problem, and the rationalization to it. Why are you even doing research on this particular topic or subtopic or theme or question? Why are you raising these research questions? So your introduction essentially begins with a backdrop, a context. We also write a backdrop or context because remember, particularly in social science research, we need to historicize the sociological problem that we are wanting to study. It cannot be ahistorical, neither can it be apolitical. Now, it depends on the lens in which you wish to write or do research on. Okay, so the introduction broadly gives a context, gives a background, brings forth your objectives, your research questions, your research problem, your rationale, and then sometimes you may even choose to write your, either the literature review comes in there, or you choose to begin with a brief of the literature review and you jump into methodology. Now, here it depends on the research design of your project. Now, what is your research design that you have chosen? Depending on that, your style of writing and also your methodology is very, very important. That will determine the writing format of the research paper and the requirement of the journal. Now, the journal, what kind of acceptance will the journals do? Will the journals take ethnographic writing? Will the journals take narratives? Or will the journals prefer only quantitative? So it all depends on, so it's a combination of all these factors wherein you will begin your work, where will you start thinking about your work. And then another very important aspect which should actually come within the introduction section is the conceptualization. Now, conceptualization is very important for us as researchers, primarily because we need to place or give a theoretical framework, what is called a conceptual framework. We need to provide that framework within which the researcher is locating the social reality, is problematizing that social problem that he or she would want to study. So that conceptualization becomes very, very imperative, what is either called as a theoretical framework or a conceptual framework. What theoretical paradigm do you want to use? Do you want to question the existing theoretical paradigm? or do you want to revisit or reconceptualize the existing concepts? What is it that you want to do? Okay, so this part is as important. Actually, every component of this paper is important, is indispensable, and then only will it be a full paper. So therefore, a theoretical slash conceptual framework is very, very important for a writer, for a scholar, for a researcher, for him or her to introduce, as I said, the problem. When you're introducing the problem, you have to tell us what is the concept that you're wanting to work with. What is it that you're wanting to visit? Why is it that you're choosing these concepts? You have to be very, very clear about rationalizing. I don't mean it in a very uh, positivistic sense, but then it is important for your own clarity that you are able to answer that why are you using this concept? Why are you using this as opposed to the other? Say, for instance, I am currently revising a paper of mine which I had given it for publication. So there are some minor revisions. So I've been asked to revise on certain aspects. So I have been trying to look at certain concepts or revisit those concepts and try to complete the paper by giving this theoretical framework within which one is positing one's research question. Okay, so conceptualization is very, very critical for us when we do research. Now, now, before I go to methodology, I would like to stop here and ask if you all have any questions till what I spoke as of now for the past 10 minutes or so. Please take 2 minutes and I'm ready to listen. So, no interjections, no questions. Okay. So, I move ahead. And as you all know, that when we write a paper, now, as I said, now what do we mean? Now, let me just go back to the previous slide. Perhaps you may need some clarity on it. Uh, but I hope you all are clear about these terminologies like research design. I hope you all know these terms. What is research design? What is research methodology? What is the difference between research methodology and methods? What is concepts? What is abstract? What is theory? What is social fact? I mean, those who are sociologists, I would be very happy if you all are able to contribute on this. But what is important is for our conceptualization part, for instance, is actually a theoretical framework. Okay. So, say for instance, if you are wanting, see, I work on labor. So, if I'm wanting to look at something like the typical classical Marxian perspective of looking at the working class at a particular time period, but now when we look at class as a concept, it has to be revisited in contemporary times. So, how am I revisiting class as a concept in contemporary times is something that is what is called, a process of reconceptualization or reiteration of the earlier theoretical moorings, because we will take those earlier theoretical moorings, but we will choose to apply in the contemporary. So when we are applying in the contemporary, how is class revisited? Are we even talking now of a concept of the working class, or what is it now? So we look at literature which has looked at the questions of class, working class, social class. Then we have scholars, earlier scholars like Jan Bremen and others who looked at footloose labor, who looked at terms like neo-bondage and so on and so forth. So we are in a post-liberalized era. So constantly we need to keep in mind that what or how has liberalization impacted labor. So we will bring in concepts of neoliberalism, uh, free market economy, to understand the workings of capital vis-a-vis class relation. Okay, so that is what I meant by a theoretical paradigm or a theoretical framework, or revisiting the existing theoretical literature. So this is very, very critical for you all to so that you all are able to gauge how do I problematize my research framework? How do I problematize it? My research question. What is my research question? Why am I even asking this particular research question? So remember, in an academic paper, your rationale, your research problem, your research questions, your research objective has to be very much in the page one. In page one itself, in the introduction, you have to mention these things, that this is the objective of this paper. Is this to examine what is it that you want to study? To explore what is it. Now all this, as I said, if you look at the term, it will vary upon the language, will be dependent on your research design that you choose. So therefore, these very important, one is rationale of your study, one is your research design that you choose to do, one is your problematizing your research question. How are you framing your research question? What are your research question? What is your research objectives? But these will only come after you have done a rigorous literature survey. But in the introductory paragraph, you will write it very, very straight and clear. There is no gray area. It's just written in black and white. The objective of the paper is this, this, and this. The research questions are 1, 2, and 3. The rationale behind this research question is this. Okay, the methodology will be discussed in the subsequent section. And then you keep telling about the concepts that you are wanting to apply on. What is it that you are wanting to work upon? So there are different kind of course, conceptualization also parallelly will only come about through your literature review. Remember, you have to constantly read literature to be able to arrive not just on your research problem, but also to be able to arrive at your conceptualization, and perhaps it may even help you in designing your methodology. Okay, your methods, what kind of methods that is best for your academic research. So we'll come to that section next, which is, of course, the research methodology. At times when we write academic paper, sometimes in the introduction itself we choose to write introduction and methodology. Sometimes in the introduction we may include as background, conceptual framework, research questions we may write. So it's all a permutation and combination of your topic of your research. Okay, what is it that you're wanting to research on will also kind of change the shape in which, and to the journal whom you're submitting your academic paper, will also take shape, which or rather will shape your writing style. So as I'm saying, so the introduction may comprise of introduction and methodology. The introduction may be a section, may comprise of the following subheads. It could be a backdrop or a background. It could be a context. It could be a conceptual framework. It could also include review of literature. So it's the manner in which you will, your research design, what is your research design of your project, of your study, will also somehow dictate in which you extrapolate the materials that you've gathered from your research project to convert into an academic paper. So sometimes research methodology is written particularly as a separate section when we do empirical research. Okay, so when it is a fieldwork based research wherein the scholar has to give lot of detail as to as to everything about the field, why you're choosing the field, who all are you interviewing, how are you interviewing, what were your basic questions that you are asking your participants of your study, or were you doing a survey, or were you analyzing data, or were you doing a mixed method approach? So when there is a little lengthy, elaborate detailing of your site, your field site, your research site, or archival, so what is it that you are wanting to do? So sometimes research methodology will become a separate and a more larger and a fleshy section, because it is important when we do empirical research, we must, as authors, as writers, as researchers, we must be as explicit and as transparent and as and as properly lucid as possible in our writing style, primarily because we must understand that the reader, we must keep this into the mind, that the reader does not know anything about my field. So I need to explain to the reader what is my field all about. So in the methodology section, when we write the methods, when we write the tools and techniques, when we write the ethics of the study, when we write the methods that we took, was it quantitative, was it qualitative, was it ethnographic, was it archival? We need to elaborate. We need to elaborate everything in detail, because then only will there be validity about your research. Okay. Ethical questions will come in. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Research ethics is a very important component while you write the methodology part, that how have you maintained research ethics in your research. That is very, very crucial uh, while you write a full paper. Now, so therefore, what is happening is that, so therefore what we see is that research methodology, as I said, can either be a separate section or can be subsumed within the introductory section. And therefore what we do is, keeping the key components in mind, the journal requirement and the nature of the academic paper, we'll have to structure our paper. Okay, but our paper will not be without certain, most of these key components that I'm talking about over here. It may just be that there will be, as I said, in the introduction might be with methodology, introduction might include context or background or conceptual framework and literature review. So it all depends on the research problem that you want to, and your discipline. What is important, most important, is your discipline, your, which will also determine the methodology that you adapt, because economists will have a different methodological framework as opposed to political scientists or sociologists or historians. So the discipline plays a very, very crucial role in determining the methodology that we choose to study. Or we could also have a lens of interdisciplinarity, which is again, many people are getting into interdisciplinarity, trying to bring in history, trying to look at politics, trying to look at economics, and also within the social question. Okay. Uh, so then, uh, till here, and then what we see is that then we come to the main body of the paper. So what we've done so far now is the introduction, conceptual framework, which also may the literature survey, literature gaps, the research questions, objectives, rationale, everything, and then the methodology, and then we come to the main body of the paper. Now, what does this main body of the paper comprise of? Now, what is important for us as researchers is that as we are working on our independent projects, as I said at the beginning, that it is very, very important that we start filtering our literature that we get. Okay.
I believe there is
Excuse
some
me, ma'am.
problem.
I think there
Yeah.
is some problem.
Yes,
Ma'am is not
neither
audible.
PPT nor sound is available. I think ma'am is not there as well.
वो ज्वाइन कर
विकास
रही,
sir?
1 मिनट है ना. शी हैज सेंट मी मैसेज.
जी. Participants, please don't leave the meeting. Ma'am is driving.
अर्पण मैम ज्वाइन कर रही है, वो थोड़ा सा नेटवर्क इशू है, ज्वाइन कर रही
जी सर.
है. जी सर. ठीक है, ठीक. हेलो. ये तो किसके साथ है? हॉस्टल वाले कल आप वीडियो कॉल इधर वाला ही कहाँ से कहाँ से.
Yeah, please see if it's visible.
It is visible, ma'am.
Okay, okay, sorry. Sorry, now we'll have these power trips because of the summer. Yeah. Yeah, so I was discussing on the main body of the paper, and what I'm trying to tell you all here is that uh, while we are doing research, as I said at the beginning, that how should we organize our thematics? Okay, so the themes that arise from our research, it is very, very crucial for the researcher to be alert as to the themes that are important, themes, sub themes that are important in our analysis. Okay, because you all know very well that when we are doing research, we are actually trying to share our findings. We are trying to share our key arguments based on the findings of our research. ठीक है ना? So when that be the case, what do? We will have to. It is important that we will have to organize our work in a thematic manner, and this is made possible with the help of our secondary literature review. See, why I'm saying this is, see, for instance, I will share with you this paper that I'm working on, and I was sharing with you all that how I was looking at a concept called transnational labor, and what does transnational labor do to social protection of employment. And then we had a situation of the COVID where a section of the workforce in a particular industry were terminated from employment. Okay. And they are now fighting a case in the court. Now, that is the social reality which I tried to problematize. But then I started reading literature to be able to, that would assist me in theoretically framing my work. So I came up, I got into this, or rather, I read this literature around transnational labor, which I then used it for my writing. But then gradually, when I started reading and I started researching, the real problem that emerged was that these set of people who were terminated from their jobs during the pandemic were now facing difficulty for the simple reason that they were in a particular sector which was designed to have aesthetic labor and emotional labor. Okay. So, for them, given the requirement of employment, of aesthetic labor, emotional labor, effective, value of labor, that these people, when they were terminated, they were not able to get jobs once the industry revived. And that led me to think as to what was the factor because of which these set of young adults were unable to get jobs in the same market. So then what it turned out was that these set of people had more than 10 years of work experience, and I'm talking about work in the flight attendant, the cabin crew, the aviation industry, and they had worked for more than 10 years, but then when they were seeking employment, age turned out to be a very, very important deterrent for their gainful employment. So, why I'm giving you this example is to make you all understand how do we build our variables of our study. What are the variables of our study which then become thematics, which then we have to do a thematic analysis, and that thematic analysis has to be so structured. That is the strength of our paper. The thematic analysis should be from macro to micro, or rather from a more larger perspective. We then start narrowing down. We then start filtering the variables which are important for our study. So what I'm trying to say here in this particular slide is that it is critical that when we write the main body of our paper is that we need to organize it thematically. Now, this organization of themes is obviously an indication, as I said, and I'm repeating again, an indication which we get through our secondary literature. Now, please remember, like for instance, when I mentioned you, for example, age being an important variable as a deterrent for these people who were terminated cabin crew, I then started looking at literature around age, stress, work-related stress, age-related deterrents in this particular industry. And then what do I find in that literature? Okay. And then what does my data speak? What do my participants have to say? I try to merge both secondary, I try to complement or be not necessarily complement. My empirical findings can even contradict the secondary literature. Okay, so we need to be very careful as to what kind of literature we choose to review, and our arguments have to be made very, very strongly as to what we are trying to say. So, therefore, in this particular side, it is very important in the main body of our paper requires to be organized thematically, wherein we may choose to merge both secondary, empirical, archival materials that we as researchers have gathered. Okay, and then, of course, the writing style, as I already told you, will depend on the methodology that we choose to adapt. Now, this methodology can be qualitative research, where we know what do we mean by qualitative research. I'm sure all of you all know about it. Or it could also be purely quantitative research, or it could be an ethnographic work wherein we immerse ourselves in the field for months to an end, and we learn to live with the community, we study the community, we understand their language, their culture, their social norms, their routines, their everydayness, to be able to write in a descriptive analytical manner. And here, obviously, we are insulated from our own social world and we are totally immersed into the field. So, there are different forms of methodology. Of course, ethnography now, post pandemic, we have come up with something called digital ethnography, virtual ethnography, patchwork ethnography, so on and so forth. There are many, many visual ethnography. There are so many newer shades of doing ethnography. So it depends on the researcher's quest for knowledge. What is the researcher's quest for knowledge? Will also shape the method that the researcher wishes to adapt.
Participants, please be patient. I think there is some network issue on ma'am's side. We will let you know in 2 minutes.
Hello. कह रहा था 2 मिनट वहां रुक जाइए, मैं सर को जब फोन लगाया तो आपको रुक जाना चाहिए था। अभी क्या बोल रहे हैं, बात कराइए। आपका कौन बच्चे? हाँ, उनमें से किसी को भी दे दो। हाँ हाँ, दे दो दे दो, हाँ दे दो। थोड़ा जल्दी भेज दो, जाए नहीं तो वो भी चली जाएंगी। हेलो। हेलो। हाँ। हेलो मैडम। हाँ, मैं विकास बोल रहा हूँ। लिफ्ट हो गए क्या मैम आप? ठीक मैम, देख लीजिए तो।
Sorry, we are having this fluctuations. I can't help it. Yeah, so I was telling you about this slide particularly where we are looking at depending on the methodology we adapt, the writing style will depend on this, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, ethnography, mixed methods. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this primarily because if you know, when we are saying qualitative research, you know very well we will have quotes, we will have verbatums, we will have narratives, and these narratives need to fit into the thematics that we are wanting to write upon. And these narratives are evidences that will corroborate our arguments based on the along with the secondary literature that we have reviewed. So remember that when we are writing, our writing style is dependent on very much on the methodology that we choose in our projects, and that methodology clearly gets reflected into the article that we are writing for an academic paper submission. So for instance, if we do quantitative, for instance, we will have our papers will